Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. From Peterson's, I'm your host, Taylor Sienkiewicz, and you're listening to You Have a Cool Job, a podcast highlighting those who took their profession in a unique direction and what they did to get there. On this week's episode of You Have a Cool Job, meet Kristina Thayer, a modern candle maker. Kristina owns Candelaria, an artisan boutique for candles and other locally made crafts located in the Santa Fe Art District of Denver. With such a specific concept, I asked Kristina what inspired her to open Candelaria. It turns out the store is just part of Kristina's larger business plan.
It's actually probably number 3 or 4 and a stepping stone to a larger business idea. So it came out of a previous business that I had called Flickerbox. Flickerbox is a subscription box company that I started about 7 years ago when I was living in Chicago. And this was at the forefront of the beginning of subscription boxes. So I think Birchbox had just launched at that time. And this idea of curating a selection of goods and shipping it off to people was a very brand new idea, or at least in popularity, right? Mm-hmm. So I thought the idea was really cool. And I had a smaller box that no longer exists anymore. They had reached out to me to ask me to make a couple of little crafts that I was making and selling on Etsy. And so I had to make thousands of them for this one company. And I just kept thinking about how cool it was to start this own business. So I started Flickerbox, and the idea was to find artisanally made candles in the U.S. that were like healthy and were mostly made and operated by female-owned businesses. So I did that for a long time. And after like 5 years, I decided I had probably become the authority on candles, given how many I had, vetted and sniffed and experienced the way that they were all being made. And then I started Candelaria as a candle company and started making my own thing. So then, fast forward a couple of years, and I'm living here in Denver, and it was always kind of a dream to have my own store. And it gave me the opportunity to use the idea of sourcing great products, just like I did for Flickerbox, and a store. So I could expand from candles to plants and books and pottery, ceramics, textiles, you name it. So that's kind of where the whole store started. Started with my candle and expanded into incubating other independent makers.
Okay, cool. So why specifically candles?
I have a little bit of a knack for knowing what people want. A lot of the jobs that I've had have always pushed me to this position of being a leader and choosing things for people. I worked as a personal shopper at Bloomingdale's in Chicago, choosing things for people. I used to work on the Little Black Book blog on Style Me Pretty, choosing vendors for people who are getting married and putting together weddings. So it's something that I knew I was going to be really good at. Now, when I was in college, which my education has nothing to do with my business, but when I was in college, I did work at a candle store just as a manager. I had nothing to do with the production or creation of products, but was just there kind of making the store look pretty and dealing with customer day-to-day interactions. And after I left that job and was living in Chicago trying to seek what I had gotten my degree in, I realized it was really hard to find quality-made candles that were not just something at the end cap of, TJ Maxx or at some big box store at the mall. And so I knew a lot about candles, even though they weren't a particular interest of mine. I had a lot of people I knew. I had a lot of networking going on. And I think a lot of the people I had met who made candles had been in the game for a really long time. These are people who might have even been close to retirement age, who have spent their lives making candles. And I found all of those stories super endearing and wanted to be part of that.
Okay, great. And how did you learn how to make the candles?
The company that I worked at prior, the store that I was manager at, they used paraffin candles. So there's multiple different kinds of waxes for making candles, and I knew I didn't want to work in paraffin. Paraffin is petroleum, which is derived from oil. So we know those as carcinogenic type candles. And using inspiration from all the other candle makers I had met in the past, they were working with beeswax, palm wax, coconut wax, soy wax. I decided to use my knowledge from them and use soy wax. But everybody makes candles very differently. So I spent probably about 6 months in trial and error using the basics of candle making and then extending that to what I was hoping would be a finished product. So it's probably 6 months before I saw a candle and decided, yeah, I could probably sell this one.
Okay, interesting. So what is that process like? Are you making jar candles and it's just about getting the consistency right?
Yeah, so there's a million variables that make your candle what we call a good candle. Mm-hmm. And we're looking to make scented candles. So, of course, getting your fragrance to be evenly distributed throughout the candle is important. Making sure that your wick is in the center is very important. Making sure your candle burns properly so you don't have all that wax on the outside of your jar. Mm-hmm. That's part of being a proper candle, a good candle. There's a lot of little things that make up a candle. And then, most importantly, I think, is your branding and your packaging, to ensure that your candle stands out. There's a million candle makers in the United States and worldwide, and I just wanted to make something that was a little different. So yeah, it took a while to, you pour a candle and it doesn't smell great. You pour another candle and it doesn't burn great. You pour another one, it doesn't look great. So it's a lot of trial and error to make sure that you have the candle that you know looks good, smells good, and that someone will actually want to buy.
Okay, got it. And how do you feel like your candles stand out then?
When it comes to fragrances, I definitely approach making candles different than a lot of candle makers do. I talk about this a lot as my store does offer candle making classes, and I spend a lot of time talking about how our sense of smell is most closely associated with our memory. And so I approach candle making with a little bit of nostalgia. I do have my education. I have my bachelor's and my master's in history. So I'm what I would, self-described nostalgia junkie as it is. So I like to create fragrances that kind of take me to a place or in a time instead of just creating a fragrance that smells like one thing. Mm-hmm. I often see candle makers making a candle that smells like birthday cake or magnolia. And I never wanted to make a candle like that. I just wanted to make a candle that smelled good. So I spend a lot of time working to make a candle smell like nothing and everything all at the same time. I also, in the same midst of using a very creative and unique way of approaching fragrances, I decided to name my candles after rocks and gems, which ultimately has nothing to do with what they smell like, but it removes predispositions that we have about fragrances. So rather than tell you right up front, oh, well, this one has radish, rose, orchid, and amber, and then you as a consumer are left to decide, well, do I like radish? Do I know what that smells like? That sounds gross. Mm-hmm. You already have your ideas of what you think this candle could smell like. So I name it something like coral, and you have no feelings about coral. So you just go ahead, smell it, and then you're kind of left to use your gut reaction if it's something that you do like or you don't like without anything that will, serve as a predisposition to determine whether you like that or not. And then our next thing is really about packaging. I didn't want to use wasteful packaging, so I didn't want to put them in heavy boxes and spend a lot of money on heavy inks and things that I knew people weren't going to reuse. And also candles. We hear it all the time. We see it all the time. To get this candle, and then you can clean it out and you can plant a flower in it, or you can use it as booze glass or a catch-all. But I don't do that. I try, and I don't even do it. So I know my customers aren't really going to do that. And I wanted to find another way to make a sustainable product that looked good and was made good. So we do something called a coaster lid. So it's a glass jar, and on top of the glass jar, we make a wood laser cut coaster. It has really gorgeous cutout geometric shapes. So it serves a statement piece on top of your candle when it's not lit in your home. Everyone sees it. It's really eye-catching. And then when you're burning your candle, it goes underneath your candle to protect your furniture from being burnt. Of course, long after the candle's gone, you still have a coaster for other plants, candles, drinks, whatever you want to use it for.
Right. So if somebody, I feel like that incentivizes people to buy a bunch of your candles. So I'm like, well, I need a set of 6. So
Of course. Yeah. And there's a couple different designs. So it becomes a collect them all. And we do also host a refill program. You can bring back those glass tumblers without the coaster and we refill them at a discounted price.
We'll get back to Kristina's story right after this. Are you searching for the right college, grad school, or trade school to fit your needs? Or are you studying for those entrance exams you need a good score on? Peterson's has you covered. With advanced college and scholarship search functions, test prep for everything from the SAT to the MCAT to the firefighter exams, and tons of free resources on our blog, Peterson's helps you find, get in, and pay for school, plus much more. Visit petersons.com today. And now, back to the show. Kristina talked about how she brings in the work of other local artisans. I asked her how this works in her store and why this local involvement is important to her.
I like to consider myself an artisan, not necessarily an artist. And I think there are a lot of people out there, especially my age, who identify more with the artisan side of things instead of the artist side of things. And that usually just means that you picked up some kind of a skill or trade and you're able to make a product and that people are really going to like. And I totally resonate and understand that feeling. And so I love to find people who are making things that stand out and see themselves as someone who's making a quality product without it being a really high priced product. You know, so we're not looking at having $10,000 custom made tables in the store, but I love when someone decides to make a cross stitch kit. You know, that's such a cool way to get people involved in making something and just teaching a little bit of a skill. And there's so many long lost things that we don't do anymore, you know, knitting and sewing buttons and cross stitching and macrame, which we all know has made a nice big comeback these days. So trying to find things that people are making that are pouring their heart into and seeing that there are a lot of customers out there who want to buy those really cool made products.
Yeah, and that ties into your classes a little bit too, right?
Totally. So our kind of store motto is that we incubate independent makers one candle at a time. And that's the whole idea coming from Flickerbox, is that I started making candles as my own artisan and my own maker, and then moved on to finding other independent makers to also sell in the store. And I think on Facebook, I actually refer to the store as Candelaria Maker Studio. And it's the same idea. When you come in and you take a class, it's a make and take. I don't want you to come in and just learn a skill and not be able to make something. So when you come in, you get to finish an entire project for your class. So if you come in for candle making, you make 2 candles from start to finish. They do need to cool overnight, but nonetheless, you end up leaving with 2 finished candles for you. Same thing goes if you take one of our painting classes, you get to finish 3 paintings. There's no taking it home and having homework later on, or just learning a small portion of a skill that you can use later on. It's none of that. You get to make the product and then take that home. And it's a lot of the same products that we sell in the store.
Okay, interesting. And so do you feel like your store then is kind of a community hub, since these local artisans are coming in and then local people are coming in to take your classes?
Yeah, I love being down on the Santa Fe Arts District. It's a really unique place. And I was lucky enough to come in at a time where I'm one of the few actual retail locations and not just an art gallery. We all love art galleries, but I think a lot of us are often left feeling left out from the art community. The prices can often be really, really high. And while they do have layaway programs and credit programs that you can purchase a piece of art, it makes you feel like you can't quite be part of an art community. So when I came in, I really I made it intentional that we make candles right in our big front window. So when you walk by, even when we're closed, you can see all of our supplies for what we use to make candles. And then when you come take a class, again, you get to see that you can make a really fun product that you might see at a store for sale and feel like it's an unreachable thing for you. So it's in a really cool community of like-minded people, but it gives people who don't feel like they have an opportunity to either purchase or make something on their own a chance to do that.
Right, and that makes perfect sense for where you're at on Santa Fe.
Yeah, totally.
So, Kristina, could you tell me about your Burn Brightly project? I was reading a little bit about it, but I wanted to hear your take on it.
Yeah, Burn Brightly is something that, it seems like in our current world of affairs, we all feel like we need to do a little part to make the world a better place. Whether that means like picking up a piece of garbage when you get a chance or what have you. But for us, it means bringing some positivity into the world. And that usually stems from us giving a little bit of money to a nonprofit of our choice at the end of each month. So what I decided to do is take a portion of the paintings that I paint as well as a portion from the candles that you purchase in the store and donate those to a nonprofit of our choosing. So for the month of May, 2% of any of our hand-poured candles goes to Children's Hospital Colorado, and 5% of any of the paintings I sell also goes to a Children's Hospital Colorado.
That's awesome. Okay, well, Kristina, I want to jump back a little bit to when you started up your store itself. How did that process? How did you get things running for Candelaria?
Well, I lucked out a little and I had a lot of confidence. And those two things together were a great recipe for me.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted a retail space and I had a little bit of an idea of what I wanted to look like, feel like, and, the vibes that it would have. But you can't always create that. So I looked around at multiple places. I did have a realtor who tried to help me find a rental space, but I couldn't really come up with something. I had almost pulled the trigger on a space in Rhino. And so I camped out one day on a Saturday to count foot traffic to see who was coming down there, to see if my clientele who I was looking for would come down there. And unfortunately, I only counted about 10 people in about 4 hours. So I knew that Rhino wasn't going to be a place for me. I've heard time and time again not to look on Craigslist for rental spaces. It's not necessarily trustworthy, so not to do that. But I took a chance. I did look one night, and I saw the outside of what is now my store. And I thought it was really beautiful. It was down the Santa Fe Arts District, and it was so cool. The listing was very short. The listing just had mentioned that it was a live workspace, that the landlords had lived behind the store, and it was a little bit of an unconventional setting. But they were ultimately looking for someone who was really focusing on women empowerment or maybe even apothecary, something really fun for them. As soon as I walked in on a tour to meet with the landlords, I knew the tall ceilings and the big natural light in the window were going to be a win-win for me. They have these really beautiful pressed tin ceilings, just like the store I worked at, years and years ago, the first candle store I worked at. So I knew that was going to be a space for me. I didn't have to do much in terms of making the space become Candelaria. So I slowly moved into the space and didn't have much in the beginning, lots of vintage or Craigslist finds for furniture, old couches, with new covers on them. But my ultimate approach was to use minimalism. And even now you can see it in my store. I use white as a means to showcase all the other products so that they don't get hidden in what's around. So by using white furniture and placing colorful things on that, whether it's natural wood, paintings, products themselves, those items actually really start to pop.
I asked Kristina how she acquires customers and how location plays into her business.
That district, the Santa Fe Arts District, is not necessarily known as a shopping district. I don't think a lot of people wake up in the morning and think, oh, let's go down to the Arts District to go shop around for the day. I don't think that happens very often. Mm-hmm. But what the community does have is a great sense of just that. It has a great sense of community. So when there are events that happen down there, we all know about First Friday art walks, right? Mm-hmm. So everyone comes down there. There's just thousands of people that line up on the sidewalks and come in and out of the stores to check things out. So when we have events, I love how good our district is and our community is at coming out and showing up for those events. So for us, because we're a working studio, I often have days in the middle of the week that no one comes into the store. And I'm okay with that because the way our business model works is that I spend a lot of time making candles and I don't have a ton of time all the time to kind of, stand there and wait for someone to come in the store. Mm-hmm. So we're not like 100% a boutique because we are a working studio. And so that works really well for me. If I was in an area that had a lot more foot traffic, I think we would struggle as a business to do a lot of our painting and candle making to get out wholesale orders. And make products for online orders and stuff like that. That would be tricky to do with a heavy amount of foot traffic.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, and you said that this was third in your 4-part idea. What's the next step for you?
I have like an end game, if you will, lots of big ideas. There isn't much else I want to do in my life but continue to build this brand. And so for me, that means keeping my brand alive and keeping that growing. So I want to keep going with it and offer more things and move on to more lifestyle aspects of what Candelaria actually is. And hopefully that's how I'll retire.
Kristina was able to find a particular craft she could master and build a brand based on a single quality product. We hope you're inspired by Kristina's story to find your hidden talents too. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.